All right. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever part of the world you are in. Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict
Live.
So we're so excited to be here, guys. Like every Friday, we can't wait for Friday here, Ross.
That's right.
Because this is where we have our literally communication with our viewers and everybody else who likes to join us during this live stream. So, well, we got a lot to talk about this time around, okay? But before that, we're gonna do some housekeeping stuff.
We'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'd like to thank you for subscribing. It makes all the difference in the world in terms of our ability to communicate with larger and larger numbers of people. So if you have not subscribed yet, please do it today.
Well, indeed, Ross, the numbers are going up. So we thank all of you for supporting us and spreading the word regarding the channel. We also want to thank our Patreon members. You know, this guy's been with us since from way back. So your support means a lot to us, and we don't take it for granted. So we want to thank you for that. And for you, who just maybe this is your first visit to our channel, if you like to support us, consider subscribing, but joining also our Patreon membership. So we, as I said, we're gonna just talk about some housekeeping stuff first. Then, like we always do, Ross and I, we're gonna launch into what's going on around the world. Then we'll dig deeper into our topic of today. So for some housekeeping stuff, we wanted to let you know, hopefully you enjoyed the interview with Cyrus Jensen we had last week. What do you think, Ross?
I thought that the man was truly dynamic, great experience in China, really articulate, and we encourage you to take a look at what he's doing. He's really remarkable.
Indeed. And we're gonna, by the way, just for you guys to know, we're gonna have him again for further conversations. We also want to thank you for providing names like Brian, like Dan, whom, by the way, we are scheduling the interviews with them soon. So look out for that video, and we will give you a heads up as to when we're gonna release that. And if there is anyone else that you like to have us on our show, please reach out to them. Maybe they don't know about us yet. Maybe just let them know, and we will be happy to extend the invitation. We wanted to let our viewer know, Ross, about the upcoming China Summit.
Oh boy.
We're gonna host that, what we call the China Summit. So if you can think of anybody you would like us to invite for this summit, feel free to reach out to them and let them know about our channel, and we'll be happy to invite them. So we will give you an idea about the dates when that summit is going to be launched, and sort of we're going to invite a lot of speakers into that. So we look forward to that. Also, there is one more thing I need to let you guys know about what we call the private Discord platform. Now we have that, so if you are interested, consider joining that membership for that. And this is a special platform where you're going to have a conversation with like-minded individuals, and also this is where we dig into a much deeper issues and so forth. So like we always do, guys, when we get to this section, hello, this is the doggy here. Like when we get to the topics, when we get to this section where we open up the floor for your questions, so please make sure to put question before, so we know exactly that's what it is.
So we can tell the difference between a comment and a question.
You're absolutely correct, Ross. And also, I don't want to miss this opportunity to thank, last time we had Fred, there were some individuals like TNT, for example, for their sticker.
Oh yeah.
So we wanted you to know, we don't take things for granted, guys. We truly, truly appreciate your support.
Well, what do you think? Think we should do a roundup of world news, that is world questions?
Why not? Let's go around the world, see what's going on. At least share with our viewers.
The United States Intel report about the pandemic.
I know, that came out. It came up last night, actually yesterday, but guess what, Ross? It was inconclusive. So, are you surprised? I'm not.
I'm not either.
I'm not. So
I believe that there are people out there who do know the answer. They're not telling us the answer.
They won't. But just to let you know, when the intelligence agencies get involved, you can tell just where things go. So.
Well, The United States Vice President visited Singapore and Vietnam.
I know, that's an interesting trip. As a matter of fact, this is what we're going to be discussing today in detail later on. So we're going to get into that.
The world never stops giving us surprises.
I know. That's the beauty of it, Ross.
The CIA director met with the Taliban.
Some of us who've been around the government understand this kind of dynamics that can happen, but the majority didn't see that coming. A Central Intelligence Agency director is requesting assistance from the Taliban. It's not a laughing matter. It's not a laughing matter, but also it just highlights to you that that's how the magnitude of the failure of what we've done in Afghanistan. Now you are reaching out to Taliban seeking assistance. That tells you everything you need to know right there.
There's a whole big story in that, but that's not our topic today.
No.
Well, we've heard the opinion that Europe needs to grow up.
I know. You know what? The reason for that one is? It's because it has to do with the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. And the Europeans are telling the Americans, no, you need to extend your stay. So, well, wait a minute. What are you asking the Americans to do this? Why can't you do it yourself?
Right.
And it's almost like, why are you depending on the U.S. security in Europe? Why don't you grow up and create your own defense system? European countries they can manage themselves. So what are we spending money on NATO? Why does NATO exist in the first place when Europeans can defend themselves? So I thought about it this way, that maybe they need to grow up.
And it's about time.
You're absolutely correct, Ross. It's about time.
ISSK in Afghanistan.
Oh my gosh, that's another branch of the ISIS that used to be in the Middle East. When we drove them out of the Middle East, this split up. As a matter of fact, you guys, I'm sure you're aware of the latest bombing that took place at Kabul airport, which was conducted by ISIS-K. ISIS-K, the K stands for Khorasan, which is a region and independent in Afghanistan. They're operating out of Kunar province in Afghanistan. So ISIS-K, how they came about, just for you, a brief historical background. When ISIS emerged in the Middle East in 2014, we went in with the military and drove them out of Iraq and Syria, certain parts of Syria. So what they end up doing is one branch of them went over to Africa, into the Sahel area and Nigeria, and the other branch went over to Afghanistan. But here is the interesting information, Ross, and for you to know also, is that ISIS-K is not supported by the Taliban. It is supported by the Taliban of Pakistan. So ISIS-K and Taliban, they don't see eye to eye.
Oh, what a shock.
Yeah. However, there are those, and I am one of those, who ask the question, is this latest bombing was a coordination between ISIS-K and Taliban? Because if you came in all the way to the airport with all the Taliban's checkpoints, you tell me you can find who's who? The other explanation is, could it be that the Taliban's intelligence apparatus is so weak?
Oh.
Because if you are able to infiltrate all the checkpoints and get to the airport, that tells me right there. So it's hard to tell at this one. But what you're going to be expecting now in Afghanistan is that ISIS-K, you're going to see more operations of that. So,
I think the Taliban really have their hands full with who knows what all's going on with warlords, rival factions, and who knows what the CIA is going to do in terms of supporting factions inside to fight the Taliban.
I hate to bring it up about it. It's bad news. The U.S. has limited options. CIA has limited options. This is why there are no bases left in Afghanistan, and Pakistan didn't allow the U.S. to establish a drone base over there. So the U.S. is operating blindly, basically. There's no intelligence support. So but that's a topic for another day.
That's right.
All right.
Can we move on to our topic of the day?
Exactly. Shall we do that, guys? Let's do it.
Camilla, the Vice President of the United States,
Camilla Harris,
has just visited, and she's now just back from Singapore and Vietnam. What do you think the significance of all that is?
That's correct. What the question is, what was the purpose of the visit to begin with? And the other question that you all guys need to think about is, how come the United States preferred only these two countries out of the rest of them? You're talking about, Philippines, Thailand, and all the other countries. But yet, the decision was only on Singapore and Vietnam. And that's what we're going to dig deeper a little bit into this today. So in the case of the Singapore, well, we all know Singapore plays a crucial role into the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia.
For such a small country with such a limited population, they have an amazing amount of influence and power in the world.
Well, it's because of the amount of economic stride they've accomplished in a matter of 3 decades.
Yeah.
I mean, they moved from what we used the term back then, third world country. You don't use that term anymore. Nowadays, they use the term developing countries or developed countries. So,
and they've arrived.
Oh, they are. I mean, their economy is really, it moved up faster than you can even imagine, to the point that China back then, that was a close cooperation between the two. As a matter of fact, the system in China was even thinking in terms, how did Singapore achieve all that? They did have, they did achieve tremendous stuff, but now the relationship has changed between them, Singapore and China. And that was one of the reasons why the United States went in, because we all know what the purpose of U.S. visits in the region.
Win support against China.
China, to contain China. That's the objective. However, containing China, it's not going to work, because the United States will not be able to do it the same way it did it against the Soviet Union. It's a different time. The geopolitical landscape now has changed. You don't have the world divided into 2 camps. Now there are the emergence of new alliances. This is where you're not going to see that. However, Singapore, and I am sure you guys, especially for our viewers in that part of the world, you are very aware and understand the dynamics that exist when it comes down to Singapore's, relations with China, but also Singapore's foreign policy, given the changes that's taking place on the ground. So one of the key things that we want our viewers to know is that Singapore has entered into some sort of an understanding with the United States as far as allowing U.S. naval assets to dock on Singaporean waters. That is one of the...
when we were doing the deep dive into the information here, that was surprising that Singapore wanted to do that. You listen to their leadership, who are, by the way, are remarkably bright, remarkably articulate.
They are.
And you talk about honesty in government. That was almost shocking. They were so straightforward. And but for them to provide this for the United States, I had to ask myself, what's the benefit to Singapore to providing this?
Yeah. Well, but also they understand that they can only go so far, because they don't want to alienate themselves. Because as part of the ASEAN countries, remember that China's recent deal with the ASEAN country did not exclude Singapore. So
right.
In other words, the relationship moved from one status where Singapore was the special status, shall we say, vis-a-vis China, not anymore. And guess what triggers that? It was when China confiscated weapons coming out of Taiwan to Singapore. Because Singapore, remember, Singapore is the only country within ASEAN that has relations with Taiwan. And we all know what China's policy vis-a-vis countries that establish relations with Taiwan, because Taiwan is part of China. So one country, 2 systems.
Well, the Chinese are pretty good at punishing people they don't approve of their behavior.
Well, it's because things have changed. Look what happened with Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Look what, this is why we go back to our example about South Korea.
Yes.
They thought about it twice,
And came up with, China's our biggest trade partner.
Yeah.
Hey, I think we should stay in good favor with those people.
Exactly. And I don't blame them for that. So
not at all.
Yeah. And that was the reasons why, for example, the vice president's visit did not include, for example, Philippines. Why didn't you go to the Philippines?
The Philippines have already declared themselves.
Exactly. And so what's left is Vietnam, and that was the second leg of the trip for the Camilla Harris at the vice president's visit. So for Vietnam, it was a different reasons altogether. So just for our viewers to have an understanding of why Vietnam, but not, let's say, Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
So, what the reason for that, Ross? And I remember you and I. I don't know, when we were having coffee yesterday and we were talking about Vietnam and all that stuff, and we said that it's because Vietnam is considered the major trading partner to China for the last 15 years.
Which is surprising, actually.
So, but Vietnamese like that because they saw their economy moving up. I mean, when you are trading with your big neighbor,
Yep.
you're going to take that into considerations. As a matter of fact, I did find some stats, Ross, that indicate the percentages. That's based on what's called the ABS, the Asian Barometer survey.
Okay.
So, and what it indicates, and I'll share with you guys this one here, it found out that as of March 2020, they found more than 50% of Vietnamese respondents believed that China has the most influence in Asia. Okay, while only 14.6% chose the U.S. And
Let me say this is a joke.
Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like the Vietnamese are suffering from accurate perception.
That's an interesting one, right? And just to compare this to a decade before, okay, we go back to 2010. According to the same survey, the ABS, the Asian Barometer survey, in 2010 they found that about 43.3% of Vietnamese respondents regarded China as the most influential country in Asia. That was back then. Yet only 10% opted for the U.S.
Wow.
So, and that tells you right there, between 2010 and 2020, that gap between China and the U.S. has expanded, and China has kept far ahead. So now there are those who are saying that because Vietnamese, they don't trust the Chinese. Some of them saying this because of the issues of the South China Sea.
Right.
But as we said last time, they can sit down and figure out a solution that works for everybody. That is one of the reasons why that exists, and why Vietnamese have this higher percentage of 50% regarding China is because of the old history. Vietnam and China share some history that goes way back. I mean,
sometimes rocky, sometimes excellent.
Yeah, and we're talking about culture, customs, language, music, you name it, because China had a great influence on Vietnam that's been grounded about thousands of years ago.
So
it's not new. And this is where we in the West fail to understand the historical aspects of things. That's like, and I'm not comparing oranges to apples here, but just to provide a real example of what's taking place right now in Afghanistan.
Right.
We did not understand the cultural setting of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a tribal society. There are always going to be issues between them.
Well, don't you think we ought to try to impose Western values and Western culture and Western ways of doing things on a tribal society?
Yeah, and it won't work. And this is one thing we always keep making the same mistake, repeating that over and over and over again. The one thing that I see, Ross, and correct me if I am wrong on this, the one thing that I see in Vietnam, given the numbers, there are those who favor the U.S. Because they're saying that China is bullying them. And here is where I'm coming, and this is my personal opinion, by the way, guys. The way I'm coming at this from is the generational division that exists within Vietnam. It's no different than what is in Taiwan. The younger generation versus the older.
And it's no different from when the great leap forward in China, the younger generation versus the older. I mean, and we've seen this in this country over and over and over again. Young people being the revolutionaries being the troublemakers, being the demonstrators.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying they're wrong, but they're ineffective.
You're absolutely correct. So, and I think that is one of the reasons to why the vice president's or the U.S. government's decision to single out those two countries for the visit rather than others is because of those changes. Because mind you, that both Singapore and Vietnam will play a role will contribute, shall we say, to the geopolitical shift in Southeast Asia. And now, with what's taking place in Afghanistan, of course, it exposed now, okay, is the US in a position to still maintain its influence? And a lot of analysts saying no. So it's because once you lose credibility, Ross, we all know. Once you lose credibility, that's it.
Well, it's now over and over and over again. The United States losing credibility for supporting governments.
Yeah. So this idea of the relationship between the U.S. and Singapore, yes, there are ties there, there are an understandings and so forth, but it is my belief, and I could be wrong, that Singaporean government is going to be thinking long term. They're going to be thinking long term. This is not about next month or next year. They're going to be thinking about the next quarter century.
Well, listening to their leadership, the major presentations,
yeah,
they are certainly smart business people.
That's true, and that's what they look.
And so they're looking at long term. They're not looking quarter by quarter as the United States does.
Yeah.
And so they have to be paying attention to the Belt and Road Initiative. They have to be paying attention to Made in China 2025.
Absolutely correct, Ross.
Because they are in a position of competition and cooperation both in those situations.
Yeah, and I think Vietnam is coming at it from that angle because BRI, Vietnam will play a role into that. So they don't want to lose their share of the pie, and rightly so. If you are a head of a government, you're going to be thinking about the economic welfare of your nation.
Yes.
That's to me what a right leader does. Doesn't matter what country you're in or you're from. This is what you're going to be thinking in terms of how can I help my country to prosper. So and Vietnam's going to be thinking about it. Singapore is going to be thinking about it that way.
Well, when you take a look at the amount of business going back and forth between Vietnam and China, the answer is obvious.
You're absolutely correct. And actually, there is, I'm sure you guys know who Professor Kishore is. His insights are very, very, very informative. He has a grasp and understanding of how things are. And he's from Singapore, and he has a better understanding of where things are moving. And even with his arguments, I looked at some of his book, I read some, and listened to some of his speeches, mainly the recent one that was at Harvard University. When he talked about what will happen when China becomes number one. so what it tells me right there, Professor Kishore understood truly where the trajectory of the geopolitical landscape is headed. He didn't say when, because otherwise he would have said, well, when China and the US compete for number one. It says when China becomes number one. So it's almost like a foregone conclusion because of his insight. And this is where I see personally the reason why the US decided, okay, we're going to go to Singapore and we're going to go to Vietnam.
Listening to the press conferences, I came away with, I'm not sure anything was accomplished. They said some really nice things about pleasantries, but I couldn't tell any substantial change had occurred.
I didn't either, Ross. And I listened to both speeches from the Singaporean side and from the American side. Yes, the nice diplomatic pleasantries and all that stuff that was there. Yes, reaffirmation of the friendship that exists between the United States and Singapore. But substantially, as to a substance rather, I didn't see much. All is saying that the U.S. Will be allowed to dock its naval assets. Well, yeah, that's so what? That doesn't tell
From what
me.
I can tell, that was already established.
It was already.
So it was nothing new.
No, there was nothing new there. It's just the idea of, it will be fair to say wasn't just a photo op. It was not a photo op. No, it was, a formal visit to highlight the relationship that exists between the United States and both countries, Singapore and Vietnam. But reality on the ground suggests otherwise. You know, when you have a big neighbor like China, you're gonna have to. I'm not saying you should be afraid of China. That is not what we are saying here. But what we're saying is you have to think pragmatically.
There has to be a dynamic accommodation.
That's correct. And this is where I believe both countries behind closed doors, they're going to be thinking, yes, it's nice to give the proper respect to, U.S. Official visiting our country and so forth. All that stuff is nice. Let's get to the bottom of it. What's in it for us? Do we want to tie ourselves to the U.S. as it embarks maybe on another conflict in South China Sea? Do we want to be in the middle of it? Do we want to experience what we just saw in Afghanistan?
Is there a win position for us here by siding with one or the other?
Exactly. And usually this kind of things is not going to be disclosed when they do the joint press conference. Now, what you do in joint press conference is to highlight the good conversation. That's about it.
To add another car to that train of thought, every time I look at the headlines that say conflict between this country and that country, I'm going, of course there is. There's going to be some friction between any two countries, just as it frequently comes up, any two people eventually come to some conflict. The point is, China seems absolutely willing to, let's talk about it. Now, they're tough negotiators. There's no two ways about it. But they are willing to sit down with you and have a reasonable conversation, even if it takes years to resolve. They resolve issues.
Yeah. And actually, that's what they've been doing with Philippines regarding the South China Sea.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking, at least based on what I read way back, that they're trying to resolve that in a peaceful manner. They are neighbors. They can talk, sit down and talk. And this is where I see like the long-term strategy for the United States as far as, okay, we're gonna encircle China and contain China. It's not gonna work. It won't work.
If we're going to be buying hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese products, what are we talking about containing them?
Yeah, it won't work now that truly the recent shifts in Afghanistan, it supports my argument personally. And again, this is my personal opinion. I kind of look at information from different sources and I come to my own conclusion. I don't depend on a think tank to tell me how to think about certain things. I reach my own conclusions based on what I find, based on what I read, based on, and I've been on the ground. So,
I think that's really the high point here. You've been there,
yeah,
and you've been there a lot.
Yeah, I've seen. So, and that's why these changes in Afghanistan is going to shift or tilt the balance in a different direction. That it's not to the U.S. favor. So this is usually where I see things going. So before we go into the questions, we just want to highlight the idea, okay, was the trip a success for the United States?
Absolutely the right question.
Yeah. So, and that's, we let our viewers reach that conclusions themselves. It just because, like I saw some comments, by the way, from some of you guys, and thank you for that. You know what they're saying, Ross? They're saying, we truly appreciate you guys not pushing your political views. Well, you have your political views, I have mine, but that's not what we do with our viewers. What we do with our viewers is we present the arguments and let them reach their own conclusion.
A way to think about this is we respect each other and we respect you.
Of course.
We'd like to give you the best factual information that we have and invite you to think for yourself, come to your own conclusions, and then inform your legislators as to what your thinking is.
Of course, Ross, and this is what upsets me sometimes personally, and this is for me, upsets me when I read some comments nonsense, because that's an insult to our viewers,
the
intellectual level of our viewers. And, they are free to write whatever they want. It's just pathetic and sad to see somebody thinking at that level. So, but anyway, we won't want to talk on the negative sides. We think positive. So that's the bottom line. So was the trip a success? From our perspective, it was not. It was just a photo op, shall we say, diplomatic nicety exchange, but that's about it. Because reality on the ground is far, far harder than, and it takes longer than just a visit. So we're gonna move into the questions. We'll open this for you guys, and we'll just go from there. All right, let's see the first question. Oh, okay, Kenny, we want to thank you, Kenny, for your sticker. We truly appreciate it. So thank you so much, Kenny. You're so kind and generous. So we appreciate that. Okay, let's see our first question. And by the way, guys, before I forget, did you guys notice the new microphones? We want to thank our producer, Elizabeth. She took care of all this for us. By the way, if it weren't for her, this won't happen.
No.
So I want you to know.
Matter of fact, if without Elizabeth, none of this would happen.
Yeah. Just by the way, Elizabeth is also a producer. So professionally speaking. So we want to thank her for all she does for us. All right. First question. Ariel, good to see you, Ariel. The question is, perhaps this is Corny. I can see it from here. So. But do you both foresee a conflict or collaboration between the US and China regarding asteroid mining, specifically the Site 16 case?
The way things are going right now, China is very much on its own path. I mean, we see its own space station. We see its own trip to, uncoordinated with the United States, trip to Mars. And their technology is moving ahead so rapidly that the question is, do they need the United States for anything? They might be perfectly willing to cooperate, but they don't need us.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ross, and I concur with your assessments. Like what Ross said, Ariel, I do not see them cooperating. Because remember, U.S. Congress passed the legislation banning China from access to ISS. So China went ahead and built its own. So why will China ever consider cooperating with the U.S.? As a matter of fact, China will be inviting other countries. So I don't see that happening, and they're going to mine, and you are right about some mining into the space. There are some operations going on, and China is thinking ahead, especially when it comes down to certain areas around Mars.
Yeah, it's more likely the moon and Mars rather than asteroid, because asteroids are so far away.
Yeah. But also the idea of before they will do that up there, they're going to do it in Afghanistan
Yeah.
with the $3 trillion. So thank you for that question, Ariel. So next one. I couldn't see that one. All right, perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. Oh, Max, perfect.
Good question.
Okay. How do you see? Fucking Leo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Thank you for being here. The question is, how do you see the U.S. meddling and funded protests in Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Malaysia? Oh my gosh, that's a good question. And you know, we're gonna be having an interview with Brian from Thailand. So soon, and we intend to talk about this stuff. Yes, because here is the thing. We did a video back then, Ross. Remember when we talked about the U.S. losing grip in Southeast Asia?
Yeah.
No, because they're losing influence. You know, Southeast Asia thinking in terms of, okay, we're seeing our big neighbor is moving forward, and soon that geopolitical shift is going to happen where China is going to take the lead. We better think twice here. So, and the U.S. is seeing that because the U.S. credibility has suffered.
Yes.
And U.S. also global leadership has been declining. So, of course, this kind of activities might trigger something here and there, but it won't go that far. Look no further than what happened in Hong Kong. It didn't go far. So I don't see. Yes, they can do that, but it won't work. Next question. Bezo Wu, thank you for being here. The question is, do you think Camilla Harris' visit to Singapore and Vietnam is a way for U.S. to run away from their humiliation in Afghanistan?
What an interesting thought. I didn't think that at all, but it certainly should start to divert some attention away from the humiliation that the United States is currently experiencing.
Well, like you always say, Ross, what's behind the news?
Yes.
So that could be a diversion.
Could be.
That could be. But truly, because of the concern, while this might be a possibility for that, because the failure in Afghanistan is fait accompli. There is no way out of it. You know, we failed miserably because We had a poor strategy, and that for some other reasons that we're not going to get into this right here. But the idea for the trip, yes, it could be diversion, but also the concern that the United States has if and when Singapore and Vietnam fully commit to the direction with China. So that is the reason for that. Thank you for your question. Next question. Vietnam. You like that one? Thank you for being here. Question is, will Vietnam remember what happened to them after what just happened in Afghanistan? How will that affect the meeting with US VP?
Oh, good question.
Oh my gosh. That is a great question. What do you think, Ross?
I think too many things about this.
Mm-hmm.
One is the Vietnam War of decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've interviewed a number of Vietnamese people, they've put that behind them. I think that's astonishing. And at the same time, Vietnam had the number one trading partner, China.
For 15 years.
For 15 years.
Yeah.
I think the handwriting is on the wall in big, bold letters saying China is going to be our trading partner. They're going to be our number one influence. And that's the bottom line.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Next question. Okay. Phil J. Good to see you, Phil. Question. As devil's advocate, who is really waging the tail? Britain, NATO, or US? Okay. Who's really wagging the tail? I was like, okay, what am I reading here?
Yeah.
Who's really wagging the tail? Britain, NATO, or the US? Is US entangled in the epigenic of Europe with the mistaken belief that they have their own national identity? Oh my goodness, that is a good question. As a matter of fact, Phil, this one could be tied, Ross, to what we talked about. Europe needs to grow up.
Yeah.
Because here is the thing, and it becomes the question for even Britain is talking about the Kabul stuff and in Afghanistan and all that, and yet they couldn't do squat without the US. So, and especially only Britain.
Yeah.
Now, when you take that concept to the whole Europe, you're gonna start to ask the question: will Europe ever grow up? I mean, till when are we gonna be babysitting Europe for security here?
Especially at the horrific cost of it.
Yeah, we're paying over 70% of the NATO's budget. Why? Why my tax dollars are going into NATO to defend some European, kind of let them defend themselves. They do have now the means by which they can form their own defense alliance, just among them. And for us, allocate that money right here at home. We got enough issues to deal with here.
And does NATO really have an enemy to defend against now?
Yeah. NATO's mission, I don't know what it is. This is why in one of our videos we did about NATO shifts its sights on China.
Yeah.
Because they have to create an enemy. This is why I would not be surprised. Now we're going to be hearing about terrorism.
We're going to hear a lot about terrorism. I'm sure. ISIS is back. Who knows who else is back?
You're right. So,
I'm still laughing about this. These are not funny topics, but when you look at the irrationality of it, NATO looking at China as an enemy.
Yeah.
We laughed about it. We stated we don't think we laughed about it. Have you noticed how far China is away?
Yeah, that's right.
And how much trade goes on between each of the European nations and China, and how much investment goes back and forth? How could China possibly be the enemy of NATO?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And so this is where I say Europe need to conduct its own defense. It's in the essence. So, thank you for your question. Thank you. Hey, man, we appreciate the sticker. Thank you so much. And the question is, the disconnect lies in Mike and big tech are the only one cut out from benefit from China. The rest of the SP 500 business model revolve around China.
I think that's probably a true statement, not a question.
Not a question, it's a statement. You're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, just for you and for all our viewers here, the big businesses here in the US, Ross, they are lobbying behind closed doors the White House to lift the tariffs on China because that's where they make their money. So most of the, literally, the serious rich individuals here in the U.S., their money is coming from China's market. They're not going to admit it here because we have a hard time with the truth.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to want to admit it.
And with all the propaganda that's gone on against China, and how many people have actually believed that, it's going to be unpopular for the big business people to say, no, we changed our mind. China is really our friend. Let's get on with them.
Yeah,
let's make more money with China.
Yeah. They're going to stay quiet about it while making money quietly.
They're going to have to with all the bad press.
So thank you so much for that statement, and thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate it. Next question. Village. I like the screen name.
Okay, Village.
I like that one. Thank you for your question, and thank you for being here. The question is, how will perception of U.S. from the global South change with Vice President disaster with Vietnam, with the motto of America is back and honoring the capture of McCain?
I think he should change his how about Village Smart Guy?
Smart Guy.
It's a good because that's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question indeed. Yeah. Well, like you said, Ross, I mean, for the Vietnamese people, they're not going to forget what the U.S. did.
No, when China invaded them, they actually handed I can't say it politely. They really dealt with the Chinese when the Chinese crossed the border. They really dealt with them too.
Yeah.
And there were thousands of casualties.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese people seem willing to forgive a lot of that.
Well, also because they want to move on and they're seeing the opportunities. I mean, as I said, we're going to emphasize this point. You don't reach that status of the major economic trading partner with China, for 15 years. That's just where you see where things going economically. And Vietnam is thinking about it from that perspective.
I'm amazed how people can forgive war, what goes on in wars. I was living in Germany and got to interview a lot of German soldiers who came back from the war, who survived. And they weren't mad at the United States. The Vietnamese I've interviewed even recently, they don't seem to hold a grudge against the United States. They say, let's move on.
Yeah. And that's what it looks like the Vietnamese are doing. And I do have some friends from Vietnam. One of my good friends is Charlie. Wonderful guy, wonderful human being, and his entire family left Vietnam. And if you only know the story how they left, on a tiny boat.
Oh boy,
it's one of those stories, and living in the camps and all that stuff. And it has a wonderful life here, and it puts us behind. Vietnamese wants to move on. Where it's gonna be, and again, I'm almost comparing this to. It's gonna be like the younger generation versus the old one.
Yeah,
that's what it's gonna be. Where those, but so far, at least based on what I've been reading from different sources, Vietnam is moving into the direction of prosperity, and China seems to be paving the way for that, given the size of the trade.
Xi Jinping has this statement that he makes about, I want to move the Chinese people into moderate prosperity. And going, how realistic is that's truly an enlightened view. He didn't say middle class. He said, and I think Vietnam is sort of headed that same direction. Moderate prosperity.
Because they're seeing where the shift is.
Yes, exactly.
So they're going to go with it. All right, next question. Next question from TF. Thank you for being here. The question is, what is the percentage of Americans believe in and support Americans' ongoing war policy with other countries around the world?
What a remarkably good question. I think it's not knowable right now because the fallout from Afghanistan is just really beginning to hit home.
Yeah.
And it isn't like any of the news media is saying, boy, this was a victory for the United States. It's like every outlet is saying, this is a humiliation. They're not saying it in those words. They're looking at the chaos, the deaths, the damage, and the money that was spent. So in 3 months, we might have a much better idea as to where the United States people think about the American war machine.
Yeah. I don't have a lot. Yeah, I don't have numbers. I don't have percentages as of now. However, the sentiments outside, when you talk to people, and when I go out, grocery shopping or whatever, and you end up striking a conversation. Son, it's fed up with where the U.S. is headed with this nonsense stuff as far as conflicts. It's because people are starting to sort of. I just had it yesterday, Ross, in my classroom. I teach, by the way. I'm a professor of government, and I was explaining to my students yesterday that the idea of you guys need to understand, the wars we've been involved in. Those are not wars; those are conflicts.
Right.
And the purpose of the conflict was nothing but to extend it, and the reason for extending it, nothing but to make money. And who's making the money is special interest groups.
The war machine.
The war machine. And they were looking at me like, oh, there can be Dr. O. They call me Dr. O because I can't pronounce my last name. And I said, no, it is because it will be hard for you guys to understand this reality. And if you go back in history, just after World War II, and you start to realize, because which war did we ever win? World War II. So after that, the 5 conflicts that came after it, the Korean War, Vietnam War, Gulf War, Gulf II, Afghanistan.
Those are real victories, but not for us.
We didn't win any. But also because that was the doctrine that was set up in the early 50s. The U.S. needs to get involved into conflicts. So Ike,
right?
Eisenhower, former president, was writing his January 17th, 1961 speech, where he said,
beware of the military-industrial complex.
And he warned.
He warned us.
Yeah, and the warning coming from a U.S. president that tells you the severity and the consequences if that's been let go, like the way it is.
And what it tells us is even the general who was partially responsible for the winning of World War II could not stop the power brokers.
That tells you right there.
And so here it is. What is that? 40, 60 years later, and we're still facing it.
Yeah. So it would be interesting. That's an interesting question because it would be nice to see the stats. So next question is from, here it is. I was wondering where you are, Birikov. Good to see you as always. And the question is, as U.S. VP visits in Vietnam and Singapore yielded no significant result geopolitically, isn't this also a BI sign that U.S. influence is fading?
Yeah, what language should we answer in?
That's an incredible question.
It's a really good one.
You hit the nail on the head, Birikov, because what significance does the trip yield? Nothing. Some photo ops with the foreign minister or prime minister of Singapore, some photo ops with the delegations in Vietnam, the high-ranking officials. So what? They're talking in an article about the VP got in an armored vehicle with 9 vehicles. Who gives a damn about that stuff?
Right.
Pardon my language. It's kind of like, why do we care for that? What are the substance of the visit? There was nothing accomplished.
Well, they have to talk about the armored car because there was nothing of substance that went on. And that's not how things seem to happen.
No.
It's all the behind scenes going back and forth between other people than the vice president or the president.
Exactly. The way I see it, Ross, is that most countries nowadays, they're going to give the proper respect to American delegations' visits and all that stuff, but that's where it ends.
And that's what the Prime Minister of Singapore did.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee did a great job of being very polite, attempting to be substantive, but saying nothing.
Exactly. So, and you're absolutely correct about the decline of American leadership around the world. All right, next question. Oh, hey man, thank you again. We appreciate the sticker. This is the 2nd time.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Hey, is that
Afghanistan?
It's a statement. Is Afghanistan a warning to nations hosting bases that were willing to go full scorched earth on them? Better to be a client state than a fail. Wow, that's an interesting. As to if it is a warning to other countries, yes, it is.
And they're listening.
Yeah. Well, you got now in Southeast Asia countries thinking. Central Asia countries are thinking, and this is why. And the way to see this, at least from my perspective, and this is my opinion, the way to see this is by when the United States was looking for a base around Afghanistan, no country was willing to allow it. In the whole vicinity of Afghanistan, including Central Asia. No country. As a matter of fact, Russia made it clear to the US, you cannot have a base in Central Asia. End of story. And that tells me right there.
Also, what was going on in the U.S. failure in Afghanistan could not have been a mystery to anyone who was paying attention in the region.
Exactly. I mean, we all knew back in 2006 that, this is not a winnable war, if you want even to call it a war. And yet we keep dragging, the memos coming from Afghanistan indicating that we need more funding, we need more.
We're on the brink of winning. Oh, yeah. We're winning now. This new initiative is really clearing the fields.
Yeah.
No, wrong.
And most Americans are busy with watching the idiot box with social media and news and all that stuff that's just feeding them whatever. It's because some of us, and I'll say it straightforward here, I'm not going to hold back. Some of us did not develop that critical thinking aspects of, I got to read between the lines. What is this social news media is telling me? I mean, what I find ironic that most Americans do not even take a step back to realize that news media, whatever you want to call it, provides the arguments, provide the analysis, and provides the conclusion.
As opposed to conclude for yourself.
In other words, they don't want you to think. They want you just to recline on your chair with your soda and bag of chips and keep watching the idiot box while the news media is feeding whatever. So,
is it any wonder that the news media has its lowest viewership in history?
Well, it is also
not believable.
Yeah, maybe people are waking up eventually, because that's hopefully how we say, and this is where that part of the issues that we did not understand. Some of us, not all, I shall not generalize, of course, but some of us didn't understand this. This war in Afghanistan wasn't a war in the first place. It was a conflict that we intended for it to extend this long. And soon we're probably going to be hearing about another conflict elsewhere.
There might be some major pushback after this fiasco.
I think so. Well, when you think about it this, Ross, nobody's been held accountable in the U.S. government.
It's true.
I mean, come on. Man, I look at it like in my classroom, for example, if some students misbehave and something happens, well, I'm going to have to hold the student accountable for his or her action.
Right.
That's the common thing to do. In our system and our government, nobody's been held accountable.
There ought to be any number of generals or politicians who absolutely knew the truth. People like you were telling them, and they lied through their teeth.
Yeah. It's because it became convincing that some of us Americans, not all, it just believes whatever is being reported by the government.
I've interviewed any number of people. As a matter of fact, one of my cousins was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And his statement was, how do you think you get promoted in the military? Yes, sir. No matter what preposterous thing the officer said or what the higher up said, if you agreed with them, you stood a much better chance of getting promoted. If you disagreed with them, you were invited out.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes the issue of, are they doing the right thing for the country, not for their pockets, not for their well-being, not for their family, whatever. Are they, or their shareholders, whatever. Are they doing the right thing for the country? And that's where the distinction between those, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some honorable people inside the government.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was there and I saw there are some honorable people, but their voices are not being heard. And the moment they speak up, they get pushed down. That's just an unfortunate thing. So for us, the people, some of us, not all, did not develop that critical thinking to understand how things are.
It's actually punished.
Exactly.
Not rewarded.
Exactly. Next question. Here it is. Dakin San, how are you? Good to see you. The question is, do you think the former colonizer of Southeast Asia, such as Britain and France, still have interest there? Are they agree with US? Do they agree with US policy? First of all, if I may just start with one thing, that yes, like France and Britain, also we should remember the Dutch when they were colonizing Malaysia way back. So yeah, where European countries, the former colony, shall we say, they do they still maintain some sort of a very slight influence, but not the way you and I understand the same influence the United States has on other countries. So for Britain and for France, they're not on the same page. They're not. What I noticed is personally when I was on the ground in Phnom Penh, I went to Phnom Penh in Cambodia. I was there, and I did notice the French influence. We go to French restaurants over there in Phnom Penh. I was surprised to see that, but I could just tell when I will interact with the locals there and talk and all that stuff. You can still feel that French influence because I find out there are some French business people living in Phnom Penh. So yes, you still have some influence, but not the way you and I understand it. In other words, not an influence on policy, not an influence on economy, not an influence on the social structure. None of that is the influence just from the old time that at one time or at some point in country A's history, France was here, or country B, Britain was here, or country C, US is still here.
Yeah.
So that's the only difference I would see for that. Next question, Alex. Good to see you, Alex. Alex, question. Had it caught Camilla Harris by surprise that before the meeting, the Vietnamese PM, Prime Minister, first met the Chinese envoy, reassuring that Vietnam would not enter into an alliance against Beijing?
That was interesting when we read that earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was aware of that one, and I knew beforehand, even before the visit, and this is my personal opinion, that the visit is not going to accomplish anything. It's because, once again, Ross, and for all of you guys, when you reach that status of the major trading partner with China for 15 years in a row, you're not going to want to jeopardize that. And why would you want to do that?
And it probably did surprise Camilla Harris. It probably did surprise the U.S. government. But what?
So what? Well, this is what South Korea thought about.
Yeah.
When Moon Jae-in was thinking in terms of, do I join the Quad and put my country in risk with China, or do I think about the economic welfare of South Korea? Mind you that majority of South Korean businesses did operate in China.
Yeah.
And that's a big market for them. They're not going to risk it. So if I were advising the South Korean president, I said, you got to be out of your mind to consider joining the Quad for the sake of what? The Quad's not going to make it. And this is why you get the three other countries, India, Australia, and Japan, the only three other countries that join. And the Quad is not going to make it because this is not another NATO per se. They won't be able to sustain that. This is why it's dead from the beginning. It was just on papers for that. Okay. Well, we're going to end it right here, guys, because we're going to have to go do some other research for our next videos. And just to recap a few things about what's coming up, look for the video we're going to have with Brian. We're going to do that for the interview with him. Also, we are coordinating with Daniel Danborough. I look forward to having a conversation with him. I've been following his stuff. We're also coordinating with others. We don't want to disclose their names right now, so we wanted to surprise. And as always, stay informed. Till next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.